My 65th birthday. Dinner ready, table set. No one came. My son, his wife, my grandkids, and even my sister were on a Mediterranean cruise. My son's text offered a casual apology. Cleaning up the untouched food, a cold rage settled. This wasn't just a missed party, it was an ambush. Like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. The scent of roasting lamb infused with rosemary and garlic usually filled Eleanor's home with warmth and promise. Tonight, it simply mingled with the growing chill in her heart. For weeks, she had poured her energy into planning this evening, her 65th birthday party. Not a grand affair, but an intimate gathering, a celebration of family, of reaching a milestone surrounded by the people who mattered most. Her son, Julian, and his effervescent wife, Serafina. Her bright grandchildren, Leo and Chloe, who were growing up far too fast. And of course, her sister Beatrice, and Beatrice's husband Arthur, who had been steadfast companions through so many years. Every detail had been considered with a loving hand. The antique lace tablecloth, usually reserved for Christmas, draped elegantly over the dining table. Her best china, a delicate pattern of bluebells and gold, gleamed under the soft glow of the candles she had arranged just so. The crystal glasses, polished until they sparkled, stood ready for the celebratory toast. In the kitchen, the lamb, a perfect golden brown, rested on a platter alongside a vibrant array of roasted vegetables and a freshly baked apple pie, still warm from the oven. Eleanor had even splurged on a new dress for the occasion, a sapphire blue silk that felt luxurious against her skin and brought out the color of her eyes. Her silver hair, usually pulled back in a practical bun, had been styled into soft waves, a rare indulgence. The clock in the living room chimed 7, then 7:30. Eleanor paced between the kitchen and the dining room, a little flutter of excitement still in her chest. She adjusted a napkin, checked the wine cooler, smoothed a wrinkle from her dress. She imagined Julian's booming laugh, Serafina's cheerful chatter, the children's eager squeals. This was what she lived for, these moments of connection, of shared joy. 8 o'clock. The chimes echoed through the silent house, each note a little colder than the last. No one had arrived. The initial flutter of anticipation morphed into a vague unease. Perhaps traffic? Julian often ran a little late. She tried to tell herself that, but a tight knot was beginning to form in her stomach. She picked up her phone, a device that often felt alien in her hands, but was a necessary connection to her busy family. She scrolled through her contacts, her thumb hovering over Julian's name. Maybe a quick text. "Are you on your way, darling?" Too eager, too demanding, she dismissed the thought. Then she tried to call him. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Julian. Leave a message." His recorded voice, so familiar, felt strangely distant, almost dismissive. A frown creased her brow. She tried Serafina next. Voicemail, then Beatrice. Voicemail again. The knot tightened, constricting her breath. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of her composure. This wasn't like them. At least one of them would call, would text. Had there been an accident? Her imagination, usually her comfort, now turned against her, painting grim scenarios. She tried again, then again, her fingers fumbling, her heart pounding against her ribs. The silence of the phone was deafening, a stark contrast to the lively dinner party she had envisioned. Growing increasingly desperate, Eleanor found herself doing something she rarely did, scrolling through social media. She wasn't an avid user, but Serafina was, constantly posting updates of their seemingly perfect life. Eleanor hoped to find some clue, some reason for their delay. Her thumb paused, then clicked on Serafina's profile. And there it was, a flood of images, vibrant, sun-drenched, utterly devastating. Serafina, Julian, Leo, and Chloe, beaming on the deck of a luxurious cruise ship, the sparkling azure of the Mediterranean stretching behind them. Another photo showed Beatrice and Arthur, their faces glowing with relaxed smiles, clinking champagne glasses with Julian and Serafina. Hashtags popped up. #Mediterranean Dream, #family vacation, surprise trip for everyone, except her. Eleanor felt a punch to the gut, the air leaving her lungs in a gasp. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't traffic. It was a deliberate, collective absence. They were together, most all of them, thousands of miles away, while she sat alone in her meticulously prepared home, waiting. The sapphire dress suddenly felt like a costume in a play where she was the only actor, and the audience had simply failed to show up. Just as the icy realization settled, her phone buzzed. A text message from Julian. "Hey Mom, so sorry we missed your birthday dinner." Serafina surprised us with a Mediterranean cruise. "Totally last minute, couldn't say no. Hope you had a great day. Love you XAX." The casualness of it, the dismissive tone, the flimsy excuse of a surprise trip that included her own sister and brother-in-law but conveniently excluded her, felt like another cruel twist of the knife. He couldn't even bother to call. He couldn't even bother to tell her directly before she found out on social media. She felt erased, a forgotten footnote in their exciting, sun-drenched lives. Mechanically, Eleanor began to clear the table. Each movement was precise, almost robotic. She blew out the candles, the wicks sputtering, leaving trails of smoke. The sparkling china was stacked, the crystal glasses carefully placed in the sink. The lamb, now cold, was wrapped and put away. The apple pie, untouched, waited silently on the counter. Every dish, every napkin, every crumb was a reminder of the emptiness, of the absence. She felt invisible, a ghost haunting her own home, her own celebration. As she moved through the motions of cleanup, a lifetime of memories flashed before her. Decades of putting her family first. The endless school plays, the comforting meals, the late-night talks, the financial sacrifices, the emotional support, the constant, unwavering love. She had been their rock, their confidant, their unwavering presence. She had celebrated their triumphs and soothed their sorrows, always there, always ready to give. And for her 65th birthday, her reward was this: a deliberate collective exclusion, a casual text, and a family vacation shared by everyone but her. The profound hurt began to solidify into something colder, sharper. This was not a mistake. This was not an oversight. This was a calculated act. The surprise trip narrative Julian offered was a transparent lie, a flimsy veil over a much uglier truth. How could Serafina book a trip for so many people, including her sister, without anyone, especially her son, realizing it coincided with her birthday? And why would they all agree to go, knowing it meant abandoning her? It wasn't an accident, it was a choice. A deliberate choice to exclude her, to make her feel small, insignificant, and utterly alone. A cold realization settled deep in her bones. This wasn't just about a missed birthday party, as painful as that was. This was about something much larger, something more insidious. A deeper plot, a calculated move she couldn't yet comprehend. But as she placed the last polished fork into the drawer, a resolve, hard and unyielding, began to form. Eleanor would not disappear quietly into the background of her own life. She had been erased once, but she would not allow herself to be forgotten. This was not over. Sleep was a distant dream, an elusive comfort that mocked Eleanor through the long, silent hours of the night. Her house, usually a sanctuary of peaceful solitude, felt like a tomb. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the carefully constructed walls of her life crumbling around her. The initial sting of betrayal had curdled into a cold, churning anger, fueling a relentless replay of not just the evening, but years of subtle slights and inexplicable absences. Her mind, usually so orderly, raced, connecting dots she had stubbornly refused to see before. Leo's 4th birthday. How could she forget? She had bought him a magnificent train set, chosen with such care, knowing his fascination with engines. She'd called Serafina a week before to confirm the party time. "Oh, it's Saturday at 2, Eleanor," Serafina had chirped. Eleanor had arrived precisely at 2, only to find the party winding down, half-eaten cake on the table, crumpled wrapping paper everywhere. Serafina had met her at the door, feigning surprise. "Oh, Eleanor, didn't Julian tell you? We moved it to 11. So sorry." Julian, standing sheepishly behind Serafina, had mumbled an apology, voiding her eyes. Eleanor, mortified, had handed over the gift, made her excuses, and left. The train set a heavy weight in her arms. She'd dismissed it as a simple mix-up, a busy young couple's oversight. But now, in the stillness of her room, it felt like a deliberate act. Then there was Chloe's first day of kindergarten. Eleanor had looked forward to it for months, imagining the tiny backpack, the hopeful, anxious face of her granddaughter. She'd planned to be there for the drop-off, a special moment she cherished. Serafina had texted the night before, "Reminder, school starts at 8 a.m. sharp." But when Eleanor arrived at 7:50, ready to wave Chloe off, the classroom was empty, the schoolyard quiet. A teacher, seeing her confusion, explained, "Oh, most parents bring them between 7:30 and 7:45 on the first day to get them settled. Your granddaughter left about 5 minutes ago." Another miscommunication, another missed milestone, another moment stolen, and last Christmas. The memory brought a fresh wave of heat to her face, a flush of shame and indignation. Serafina had called, her voice laced with concern. "Julian's been so stressed at work, Eleanor. We're just having a very small, quiet Christmas this year. Just us. I think he really needs the calm." Eleanor, ever understanding, had spent Christmas Day alone eating a modest meal, missing the familiar chaos and joy of a family gathering. She had called Julian, leaving a heartfelt message wishing him peace and quiet. The next day, as was her habit, she had checked Serafina's social media. There it was, a lavish Christmas spread, a brightly lit tree, Julian, Serafina, Leo, and Chloe, surrounded by Beatrice and Arthur, and a host of other smiling faces, laughter bubbling from the screen. "Best family Christmas ever," the caption read. The small, quiet Christmas was a lie, a cruel deception designed specifically to exclude her, to ensure she spent the holiday in solitary silence. The pattern, once obscured by her own trusting nature and their plausible excuses, now shone with a chilling clarity. It wasn't miscommunication, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was systematic, calculated, and utterly deliberate. The birthday, Leo's party, Chloe's kindergarten, Christmas, they were all pieces of a cold, intricate puzzle. Serafina had been meticulously, subtly pushing her out. Eleanor grabbed her phone again, her fingers trembling slightly as she navigated back to Serafina's social media. She scrolled deeper, through months, even years of posts. The photo evidence piled up, irrefutable and damning. Family dinners she hadn't been invited to, weekend getaways she'd never heard about, children's events, school functions, even casual park outings, all featuring Julian, Serafina, the children, and often Beatrice and Arthur, living a vibrant family life from which Eleanor was conspicuously absent. The world saw a happy, close-knit family, and Eleanor was the only one missing from the picture. She began to see Serafina's tactics with an unnerving clarity, like watching a slow-motion film of a magician's trick. The subtle interruptions when Eleanor spoke, cutting her off mid-sentence with an urgent question to Julian or a comment about the children. The way Serafina would redirect attention whenever Eleanor tried to share a story or offer advice, making Eleanor feel like an unwelcome interloper. The quiet, almost imperceptible creation of distance, like Serafina forgetting to pass on information, then shrugging, "Oh, I thought Julian would have told you." And most insidiously, the subtle implications that Eleanor was a burden. Comments about her needing help, her old-fashioned ways, or her supposed inability to keep up with their busy modern life, creating a narrative that made her exclusion seem logical, even necessary. And Julian, her beloved son, how had he become so blind? Eleanor recalled the gradual shift in his demeanor toward her. The easy affection had slowly, almost imperceptibly, morphed into something else. A slight hesitation in his hug, a softening of his gaze that now carried a tint of pity rather than genuine warmth. He had started to defer to Serafina more, to echo her sentiments, to accept her version of events without question. The protective, loving son she had raised had slowly, undeniably retreated behind a shield of complicity. He wasn't actively participating in the cruelty, but he wasn't stopping it either. He was allowing it. The phone rang, startling her out of her morbid reverie. It was Julian. Her breath hitched. She took a moment, composed her face, and answered, her voice a little shaky but carefully neutral. "Mom, happy birthday! We're having the best time. Serafina really outdid herself. This surprise trip is incredible. The water is so blue, the food is amazing. Leo and Chloe are loving the kids' club. Beatrice and Arthur are having a blast too. His voice was cheerful, boisterous, completely oblivious to the wreckage he had left behind. He gushed about Serafina's spontaneity, her amazing planning skills, her thoughtfulness. Each word was a fresh insult, each praise for Serafina's supposed virtues a deeper stab into Eleanor's heart. He was celebrating the very act that had shattered her. Eleanor managed a tight, "That sounds wonderful, dear. I'm glad you're all having a good time." She kept her voice steady, refusing to give him the satisfaction of hearing her pain. She asked a few polite questions, feigning interest, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. The conversation was brief. Julian eager to get back to his vacation, to the family he had chosen over her. Hanging up the phone, Eleanor finally allowed the mask to slip. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but beneath the raw hurt, a spark of resolve ignited. The full weight of the manipulation, the years of subtle gaslighting, the systematic erasure crashed down on her. The realization was crushing, yet liberating in its clarity. Serafina changed that gradually, so slowly I didn't notice until it was too late. A week had passed since Eleanor's invisible birthday. The initial shock had dulled, replaced by a dull ache and a simmering anger. She had cleared away every last trace of the phantom dinner party, as if erasing the memory would somehow ease the pain. The house felt heavier, the silence more profound. She spent her days in a quiet routine, watering her plants, reading, trying to find solace in the ordinary. But her mind kept returning to Serafina, to Julian, to the bewildering betrayal. The family was still on their cruise, their carefree updates occasionally popping up on her social feed, each one a fresh reminder of her exclusion. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, as Eleanor was pruning roses in her garden, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. She rarely had unexpected visitors. Most friends called first, and her family, well, they were oceans away. Curiosity mixed with a flicker of apprehension drew her inside. Standing on her porch was a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, with kind, weary eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, probably in his late 40s. He shifted his weight nervously, holding a baseball cap in his hands. He looked respectable, but an unfamiliar face was always cause for caution. "Eleanor Patterson?" he asked, his voice gentle but a little strained. "Julian's mother?" Eleanor's wariness intensified. "Yes, that's me," she replied, her hand instinctively tightening on the doorknob, ready to close it if necessary. "Can I help you?" The man's gaze was earnest, almost pleading. "My name is Daniel Lee, he began, taking a small step forward. I need to talk to you about Serafina." The name hung in the air, a sudden jarring intrusion into her carefully guarded peace. Eleanor's breath hitched. Serafina, the architect of her misery. What could this stranger possibly know about her daughter-in-law? 100 questions immediately flooded her mind, but she remained outwardly composed, her expression carefully neutral. Daniel took another deep breath, gathering his courage. "Mrs. Patterson, this is going to sound unbelievable, but I have reason to believe that my son might be living in your son's house." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Her son, living in Julian's house? With Serafina? The sheer audacity of the statement was so preposterous, so outlandish, that for a split second, Eleanor thought he must be delusional. Then a cold dread began to creep in. Her mind flashed back to the systematic exclusion, the calculated lies. Nothing about Serafina seemed impossible anymore. "My son, you mean Leo?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely a whisper, her heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Daniel's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Then he nodded eagerly. "Yes, Leo. He would be around 9 years old now, I think. Does he have a small, distinctive scar on his chin, just below his lower lip, from when he fell off a bicycle when he was very young?" Eleanor froze. The scar, it was there, a faint, almost invisible line that only she, as a grandmother who had held him close and kissed away so many scrapes, would know. It wasn't something visible in casual photos. It was an intimate detail. Her wariness evaporated, replaced by a dizzying cocktail of shock and a nascent, terrifying understanding. This man wasn't crazy. He knew things. Deep, hidden things. "Please," Eleanor said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Come in." She opened the door wider, ushering him into her living room. Her mind was already racing, trying to grasp the implications, the seismic shift this revelation could bring. She gestured to a sofa, her eyes fixed on his face, urging him to continue. Daniel sat, placing his cap on his knee, his hands clasped tightly. He looked deeply uncomfortable, as if recounting a painful memory. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I know this is a lot. I don't know where to begin." "We'll start from the beginning," Eleanor urged, her voice steady despite the chaos in her head. "Tell me everything." He nodded, swallowed hard. "Serafina, that's what she calls herself now. Her name was Madeline Hayes when I knew her. We met about 10 years ago, maybe 11. We were both living in Denver. It was a serious relationship, Mrs. Patterson, 2 years. We were talking about marriage, about starting a family." He paused, looking away for a moment, his gaze fixed on a distant point. "Then she got pregnant. We were both thrilled. We planned everything. And then one day she was just gone." Eleanor stared at him, speechless. Pregnant, with Daniel's child, not Julian's. The air in the room suddenly felt thick, heavy with unspoken secrets. "Gone?" Eleanor finally managed, the word a strained whisper. "Vanished," Daniel confirmed, his voice laced with a decade of pain and confusion. "One morning I woke up, and she wasn't there. Her clothes were gone, her belongings. No note, no message, nothing. Her phone was disconnected. Her email address bounced back. It was like she had just vanished into thin air. I searched for months, Mrs. Patterson. I filed a missing persons report. I hired a private investigator. Nothing. She just ceased to exist until recently." Eleanor's mind whirled. Madeline Hayes, Serafina, pregnant, disappeared, Leo. It was a monstrous puzzle, each piece more horrifying than the last. Julian, her son. He had believed he was Leo's father. How could he not know? Or worse, had he known? A cold wave of nausea washed over her. This wasn't just about her exclusion anymore. This was about a colossal deception, a betrayal that ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. Eleanor felt a profound chill despite the warm afternoon sun streaming through her living room window. The story Daniel recounted was a whirlwind of deceit, a carefully constructed facade that had held for nearly a decade. She looked at him, searching his eyes for any hint of fabrication, but all she saw was raw pain and a desperate plea for understanding. "I know it sounds incredible," Daniel said, sensing her disbelief. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn, faded photograph. "This is me when I was about 7 years old." He handed it to Eleanor. Eleanor took the photo, her fingers trembling slightly. It was a sepia-toned snapshot of a boy with bright, inquisitive eyes and a mischievous smile. As she stared at it, a gasp escaped her lips. The resemblance was undeniable. The same curve of the lips, the exact shape of the eyes, even the slight tilt of the head. It wasn't just a passing similarity. It was almost uncanny. It was Leo, her grandson, but it was Daniel. "The scar," Eleanor murmured, tracing the faint line on the boy's chin in the photo. It was there, identical to the one on Leo's face. The last vestige of doubt evaporated, leaving a hollow ache in her chest. Daniel took the photo back, his gaze distant. "I saw them 3 months ago. I was in Sacramento for a conference. I was walking past a park, and there she was, Serafina. Madeline, with a boy. The moment I saw him, something shifted in me, a deep, primal recognition. He looked so much like my own childhood photos, like this one." He gestured to the picture. "And then I saw the scar, that little scar from the bike accident. My blood ran cold." He continued, his voice heavy with suppressed emotion. "I followed them discreetly. I learned his name was Leo. I saw them get into a car Julian was driving. That's when I realized. It hit me like a ton of bricks. My son, living with another man, and the woman who vanished." "You hired an investigator," Eleanor prompted, trying to piece together the dizzying narrative. Daniel nodded. "Yes, The best I could find. It took weeks, but he found her real name, Madeline Hayes, and he uncovered a pattern. Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. It seems Madeline has a history of disappearing when relationships become complicated. When things start getting serious, especially when there's a major life event, she vanishes, changes her name, moves to a new city, creates a new identity. Eleanor listened, her mind reeling. A pattern. This wasn't a one-off. This was a deliberate modus operandi. My investigator found two other men with strikingly similar stories, Daniel revealed, his voice dropping to a low, grave tone. One in Portland, one in Seattle. Both had serious, long-term relationships with a woman fitting Madeline's description under different aliases. Both women disappeared abruptly. One of them, the man in Seattle, believes the woman was also pregnant when she left. We're still trying to confirm if that child exists and if it's hers. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea, a serial deceiver, a woman who wove elaborate lies, abandoning lives, leaving trails of heartbroken men and possibly hidden children in her wake. And Julian, her trusting, good-hearted son, had fallen right into her trap. When I saw the cruise photos on social media, Daniel continued, his gaze direct, meeting hers, I saw Julian, the children, your sister, her husband, everyone but you. It was glaringly obvious, and it clicked. My investigator had also mentioned Madeline's pattern of isolating her partners from their support systems. She subtly or not so subtly drives wedges between them and their family, their friends. It makes them more dependent on her, easier to manipulate. Your exclusion, it fit the pattern perfectly. Eleanor's invisible birthday, the culmination of years of subtle slights, suddenly made horrifying sense. It wasn't just about her. It was a calculated move in Serafina's larger game, a tactic to further isolate Julian, to make him more vulnerable, more compliant. Serafina was cutting off his connection to his mother, his sister, his past, leaving him entirely in her carefully constructed world. Daniel reached into a large manila envelope he had placed beside him on the sofa. He pulled out a crisp, official-looking document. I know this is a lot to process, Mrs. Patterson, but I needed proof. I managed to discreetly obtain a DNA sample from Leo. It was difficult, but I had to know for sure. He extended the envelope towards her. This is the result. Eleanor stared at the envelope, her hand hovering, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Her heart pounded a desperate drumbeat. She knew with chilling certainty what the results would say. But seeing it in black and white felt like accepting the full, crushing weight of the truth. Mrs. Patterson, Daniel said softly, sensing her hesitation, I want you to understand, I'm not here to destroy Leo's life. He's my son, and I want to protect him. But he's also your grandson. And Julian deserves to know the truth. This woman, she's dangerous. She preys on people, builds these intricate lies. I need your help. We need to expose her, for Leo's sake and for Julian's. Taking a shaky breath, Eleanor reached out and took the envelope. Her fingers fumbled with the flap, tearing the seal. She pulled out the single sheet of paper, her eyes scanning the official letterhead, the technical jargon, until they landed on the damning conclusion. Probability of paternity, Daniel Lee to Leo Patterson, 99.7. The world tilted. The air left her lungs in a whoosh. Leo, her grandson, Julian's son, was not Julian's son. It was all a lie. A decade-long deception built on a foundation of cruel manipulation. The ground beneath her feet had vanished. The DNA report lay limp in Eleanor's hand, a stark testament to a decade of lies. 99.7% probability of paternity. Daniel Lee was Leo's father. Her beloved grandson, the child she had showered with affection, the boy she believed carried her son's genes, was not Julian's biological son. And Julian, her trusting, guileless Julian, was completely unaware. The devastation was absolute, a gaping chasm opening up in the very foundation of her family. How did you get this? Eleanor managed, her voice hoarse, her eyes still fixated on the damning document. Daniel shifted, a flicker of discomfort in his expression. It wasn't easy. My investigator, he's resourceful, Leo gets his hair cut at a local barber shop every few weeks. He managed to obtain a sample from the floor. It was a long shot, but it worked. We've been watching for months, Mrs. Patterson. Quietly. After I saw them in Sacramento, I had to be sure. I couldn't just walk away knowing my son was out there in a life that wasn't entirely truthful. The initial wave of shock began to recede, giving way to a white-hot anger that surged through Eleanor's veins. It wasn't just a simple lie. It was a monstrous, calculated deception of monumental proportions. Serafina had built her entire marriage to Julian, her entire life with her son, on this colossal fraud. She had used an innocent child, a tiny, helpless baby, as the cornerstone of her elaborate scheme. The cruelty was breathtaking. Eleanor's mind, usually so methodical, began to connect the dots with terrifying speed. Julian and Serafina's whirlwind romance. Their engagement had been surprisingly swift, less than 6 months from their first meeting. Then the sudden wedding, a modest affair Serafina had insisted on, claiming she disliked fuss. And Leo's birth, a mere 7 months later. Serafina had always explained it away with a vague mention of him being a bit premature, a common enough occurrence that Eleanor had never questioned it. Now, the timeline clicked into place with sickening precision. Serafina, or Madeline, had been approximately 2 months pregnant when she vanished from Daniel's life. She had then met Julian, swept him off his feet with her charm and vivacity, and married him quickly, securing a father for her unborn child just in time for his arrival. The premature baby was simply a full-term infant, born exactly 9 months after Serafina's disappearance from Daniel's life. It was all a meticulously crafted lie, designed to ensnare Julian and provide a ready-made family for her. She played Julian for a fool, Eleanor muttered, the words thick with fury. Daniel nodded gravely. From what my investigator uncovered, it's her pattern. Madeline Hayes. She came from a difficult background, foster care, no stable family. It explains some of her ruthlessness, perhaps, but it doesn't excuse it. She's had 2 previous marriages. Both ended in quick, lucrative divorce settlements where she walked away with a significant portion of her ex-husband's assets, always claiming emotional distress, painting herself as the victim. Eleanor listened, aghast. 2 previous marriages, lucrative divorce settlements. The picture of Serafina, the woman Julian adored, the woman who had wormed her way into their family, was transforming into something cold, calculating, and predatory. She targets stable, successful men, Daniel explained, his voice low. Men who are perhaps a little naive, a little trusting. She establishes herself, isolates them from their existing support systems. Then when the time is right, or when things become too complicated, she moves on, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. It's always about money, about security, about reinventing herself. Eleanor's invisible birthday, the systematic exclusion, the subtle manipulations, it all made perfect, horrifying sense now. Serafina's meticulous efforts to isolate Julian from his friends and family, especially from Eleanor, were not just petty grievances. They were strategic. Eleanor, with her sharp instincts and deep knowledge of Julian, was a threat. She was the one who might see through Serafina's polished facade, the one who might ask too many questions. She needed to make you irrelevant, Daniel said, almost as if reading Eleanor's thoughts. She needed you to become irrelevant before you became dangerous. A forgotten, elderly mother, easily dismissed, easily ignored. That way, when the truth eventually surfaced, no one would listen to you. Julian would be entirely under her sway, convinced you were just a bitter old woman. The chilling clarity of his words resonated deep within Eleanor. She had been so blinded by her love for Julian, by her desire to see him happy, that she had rationalized Serafina's behavior for years. But now, with the full scope of the deception laid bare, she saw it all. The subtle digs, the whispered insinuations, the forgetfulness about family events, the deliberate exclusion from her grandchildren's lives. It was all designed to sever Julian's ties, to make him utterly dependent on Serafina, to ensure her decade-long lie remained intact. Eleanor stared at the DNA report, then at Daniel. A cold resolve settled over her. This was no longer just about her hurt feelings, her missed birthday. This was about justice, for Julian, for Leo, And for all the other men Serafina had deceived, she would not be irrelevant. She would not be silent. Serafina had made a formidable enemy. A new fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Eleanor's anger. Leo was Daniel's son, not Julian's. But what about Chloe, her sweet, vivacious granddaughter with her bright, questioning eyes? Was she also part of Serafina's elaborate fraud? Eleanor's throat tightened, a desperate plea forming on her lips. "Chloe," she whispered, her voice fragile. "What about Chloe? Is she Julian's daughter?" Daniel met her gaze, a flicker of understanding and sympathy in his weary eyes. "Yes, Mrs. Patterson. My investigator confirmed it. Chloe is Julian's biological daughter." A wave of relief so profound it was almost dizzying washed over Eleanor. Thank goodness. A sliver of truth, a genuine connection, in this monstrous web of lies. But the relief was swiftly followed by a fresh surge of revulsion. And her birth, Daniel continued, his voice heavy, was almost certainly another calculated move to solidify Julian's belief in Leo's parentage, to further cement their relationship, to weave a tighter illusion. A second child, Julian's own biological daughter, would make him even more invested, even less likely to question anything or leave. Eleanor felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. 7 years. For 7 years, Serafina had orchestrated Julian's entire life, meticulously constructing a false reality. His love, his devotion, his sense of family, all of it had been built on a foundation of deception, with 2 innocent children used as pawns in her ruthless game. Leo, unknowingly living a lie, and Chloe, brought into the world to strengthen that lie. The sheer manipulative genius, the cold-hearted cunning of it all was almost unfathomable. Eleanor felt a chill spread through her, deeper than any winter cold. She finally understood with stark clarity why Serafina had worked so tirelessly to erase her. A present, attentive grandmother, someone who spent time with her grandchildren, might have noticed. She might have observed Leo's lack of resemblance to Julian as he grew older, a growing suspicion in her heart. She might have seen the parallels to Daniel's childhood photo, perhaps even recognized it. Serafina couldn't risk it. Eleanor, with her deep familial ties and sharp maternal instincts, was the most dangerous threat to her carefully constructed world. "I came to you, Mrs. Patterson," Daniel said, his voice quiet but firm, "because Serafina, Madeline, is destroying both our families, piece by piece. You've seen how she's isolated Julian from you, from his sister. My investigator found that she recently convinced Julian to liquidate a significant portion of his investments, claiming they needed the money for a new, larger home, a family investment in a more exclusive neighborhood." Eleanor's eyes widened in alarm. Julian's investments, he had always been so careful, so financially prudent. This was Serafina's endgame. "She's setting him up," Daniel stated bluntly. "She builds them up, makes them dependent, then she takes what she can and leaves them in ruins. She will discard Julian, just as she did her previous partners. She'll take a substantial settlement, disappear with the children, and Julian will be left with nothing. Isolated, vulnerable, and probably facing a long, bitter custody battle for Chloe, while Leo will be gone entirely, another lost child in her wake." Eleanor's mind conjured a chilling image of Julian, abandoned, his financial security shattered, his emotional world in tatters, alone and bewildered. The children, caught in the crossfire, ripped from the only life they knew, victims of their mother's relentless machinations. The thought was unbearable. Her son, her intelligent, kind son, reduced to a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple business card. "I'm an architect," he said, handing it to her. "I'm not a con artist or a schemer. I'm just a father who found his son and a man who wants to stop a predator. This woman needs to be exposed. For everyone's sake. And we need to act quickly, Mrs. Patterson. The cruise ends in a few days. Once they're back, once Serafina senses any suspicion, she might accelerate her plans. She might vanish again, taking the children, and we might never find Leo again. Or Chloe might be left to suffer the fallout of a bitter divorce and custody battle." Eleanor took the card, her fingers tracing the embossed letters. "Daniel Lee, signed architect. A man of integrity, facing an unimaginable nightmare." She looked down at the DNA results still clutched in her other hand. The silence in her house no longer felt empty, but charged, expectant. It was no longer the silence of sorrow, but the quiet, humming stillness that precedes a powerful storm. Serafina had made her invisible. She had tried to erase her, but Eleanor was far from irrelevant now. She was a grandmother, a mother, and a woman who had just found a cause worth fighting for. The cold resolve she felt earlier now hardened into an unshakable determination. She would protect her family. She would uncover every last one of Serafina's lies. And she would make sure Serafina never hurt anyone again. 3 days after Julian's family returned from their sun-drenched cruise, Eleanor made the call. She had given herself time, not for doubt to creep in, but for her resolve to solidify, to sharpen into an unyielding blade. Her voice, when she spoke to Julian, was steady, calm, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Julian, darling," she began, a hint of her usual warmth. "Now that you're settled back in, I think it's time we had a proper family dinner. A real conversation. Just us." There was a noticeable pause on Julian's end. Eleanor could almost feel Serafina's presence in the background, her silent alarm ringing. Julian's tone, when he finally spoke, was cautious. "Mom, is everything all right? We just got back. Serafina's a bit tired from the trip, you know." Eleanor allowed a soft sigh, a carefully calculated theatrical touch. "Oh, I understand, dear. But this is important. It's been too long since we really talked. And I have something I need to share with you all. Something significant." She let the word hang in the air, a subtle hook. She knew Serafina would sense the shift, the uncharacteristic gravity in Eleanor's voice. The game was on. Julian, ever the dutiful son, eventually agreed, albeit with a lingering note of apprehension. Saturday evening, 6 o'clock. Friday was a blur of methodical preparation. Eleanor cooked Julian's favorite meal, a rich, savory pot roast, slow-cooked until the meat fell apart with a fork, surrounded by tender carrots and potatoes. It was a dish that had always marked celebrations, comfort, and significant family moments. She remembered making it for his high school graduation, for his first promotion, for so many initially memorable occasions. Now it would preface a conversation that would forever redefine their family. In the days leading up to the dinner, Eleanor had met with Daniel twice more. They had meticulously planned every detail of the confrontation. Daniel, with his calm demeanor and meticulous planning, had become an unexpected ally. He had gathered all the documentation, the DNA results, the private investigator's comprehensive report on Madeline Hayes' aliases, her past marriages, her financial patterns, even the testimony from the other men she had deceived. Everything was organized, cross-referenced, and ready to be presented. Their goal was clear: expose Serafina without causing undue trauma to Leo and Chloe, and to protect Julian from further ruin. As Saturday evening approached, Eleanor set her dining room table, not with her best china, but with sturdy, everyday wear. This wasn't a party, it was a reckoning. She dressed in a simple, elegant, dark blue suit, projecting an air of quiet authority. She needed to be grounded, unshakable. Precisely at 6 o'clock, the doorbell chimed. Eleanor took a deep breath, steeling herself, then opened the door. Julian stood there, a forced smile on his face, a slight tension around his eyes. Serafina was beside him, looking impeccably chic, her smile a little too wide, a little too fixed. Leo and Chloe bounced ahead, their faces alight. "Grandma!" Chloe squealed, rushing in for a hug. Leo followed, his embrace tight and warm. Eleanor hugged them back, her heart aching with a bittersweet pang. These children, so innocent, so full of joy, were about to have their world irrevocably changed. Her gaze lingered on Leo's face, on the faint scar on his chin, a silent testament to the lie she was about to expose. Come in," Eleanor said, her voice warm for the children, but firm for the adults. As they settled in, Eleanor observed Julian. He looked tired, more so than after previous vacations. There were shadows under his eyes, and a faint worry line etched between his brows. Serafina, meanwhile, was in full performance mode, regaling Eleanor with tales of the cruise, of their wonderful family time. Eleanor noted her subtle nudges, her casual suggestions about Julian's stress at work, hinting at the need for an early retirement, a clear attempt to soften him up for the next phase of her financial extraction. Dinner commenced. The pot roast was, as always, delicious, a familiar comfort in a room charged with unspoken tension. Serafina maintained her perfect mother facade, praising Eleanor's cooking, doting on the children, directing the conversation with practiced ease. But Eleanor, now hyper-aware, noticed Serafina's almost imperceptible control over the conversation, particularly when it steered towards anything personal or anything that might touch upon Eleanor's recent exclusion. She skillfully redirected, trivialized, or simply spoke over Eleanor, reinforcing the narrative that Eleanor was a benign, if slightly eccentric background figure. Eleanor led her, for now. When Leo and Chloe had finished their dinner, Eleanor smiled at them. "All right, you two, why don't you go play in the den for a little while? Grandma needs to have a serious talk with your mom and dad." Serafina immediately interjected, her smile faltering slightly. "Oh, Eleanor, they really shouldn't be out of their routine. It's a school night, you know. Perhaps they should just finish up and then we can all chat." Her tone was light, but there was an underlying current of control, a subtle attempt to prevent the children from being dismissed. Eleanor met Serafina's gaze directly, her own eyes unwavering. "Serafina, what I have to discuss with Julian, and you might affect their routine quite a bit. I think it's best they're not here for this initial conversation." Her voice was soft, but laced with an unyielding steel that brooked no argument. Serafina's smile vanished completely, replaced by a flicker of fear and a dawning realization. She saw it then in Eleanor's steady gaze, in the quiet authority of her voice. The game was up, the calm before the storm was over. The playful shouts of Leo and Chloe echoed faintly from the den, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that descended upon the dining room. Eleanor sat across from Julian and Serafina, her hands resting calmly on the manila folder that lay on the table between them, a loaded weapon ready to unleash its devastating truth. Julian looked at her expectantly, a flicker of concern in his eyes. Serafina's fixed smile had completely vanished, replaced by a subtle tension around her mouth. She knew. Eleanor began, her voice soft but resonating with an unshakable conviction. "Julian, Serafina, I called you here tonight not for a celebration, but for something far more important. For honesty, for family, for the truth about who we really are and who we are connected to." She paused, her gaze steady on Serafina, who now gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Eleanor then slowly reached for the folder, her movements deliberate. "You see, Julian," she continued, turning her attention to her son, "there are certain truths that, however painful, must come to light, especially when they concern the very foundation of our lives, in the lives of our children." Eleanor pulled out the first document, the DNA paternity test result. She pushed it gently across the polished wood towards Julian. Serafina's eyes widened, a flicker of raw panic replacing the tension. "What is this, Eleanor? Are you suggesting—" Her voice was laced with a desperate attempt at indignation. Eleanor cut her off, her voice firmer now. "Julian, darling," she said, ignoring Serafina entirely, "I need you to look at this very carefully. It pertains to Leo." Julian picked up the document, his brow furrowed in confusion. He scanned the official letterhead, the technical terms. As his eyes landed on the probability of paternity section, his face went utterly blank. He stared at the numbers, then looked up at Eleanor, dumbfounded, a terrible dawning horror in his eyes. "You are not Leo's biological father," Eleanor stated gently, her heart aching for her son even as she delivered the devastating blow. "There's a 9.7% probability that another man is his father, a man named Daniel Lee." A guttural sound escaped Serafina's throat. She sprang to her feet, knocking her chair backward with a crash. "This is insane! Eleanor, you're a crazy old woman! How dare you suggest such a thing? My son, our son!" Her voice rose, shrill with a calculated fury. "Sit down, Madeline Delexu," Eleanor commanded, her voice cutting through Serafina's outburst with unexpected force. The use of the unfamiliar name froze Serafina mid-sentence, her face paling dramatically. Julian, meanwhile, sat motionless, the DNA report fluttering in his trembling hand, his gaze fixed on his mother, then on his wife, his world visibly shattering around him. Eleanor continued, her voice now calm, authoritative. "Serafina is not her real name, Julian. Her name is Madeline Hayes, and Leo is Daniel Lee's son, not yours. She slid the next set of documents across the table, the investigator's comprehensive report, copies of marriage certificates, legal documents detailing divorce settlements, and a meticulously compiled timeline. Madeline Hayes has a history, Julian, a history of aliases, of disappearing, of exploiting men for financial gain. She was 2 months pregnant with Daniel Lee's child when she vanished from his life. She met you, swept you off your feet, and married you quickly, making you believe Leo was your premature son. All of it, a calculated lie. Julian's eyes darted from the DNA results to the new stack of papers. He picked up the investigator's report, his hands shaking so violently that the papers rattled. He read the details, his face losing all color, turning ashen. The names, the dates, the cold, hard facts confirmed every word Eleanor had spoken. His gaze kept returning to the 9.7% figure, a tangible confirmation of the decade-long deception. The shock was absolute, his features etched with profound devastation. Eleanor explained Daniel's story, how he had searched for his son for years, how he had recognized Serafina's patterns of isolation and control. He saw the way she was driving a wedge between you and your family, Julian, just as she had done with him and with others before you. Serafina, momentarily stunned by the revelation of her true name and the evidence, tried to regain her composure, her eyes darting frantically between Julian and Eleanor. Julian, darling, she's lying. This is a conspiracy. She's old, confused. Don't listen to her. She reached for his arm, her voice attempting to be soothing, manipulative. But Julian recoiled as if burned. The look on his face was one of utter disbelief, disgust, and profound betrayal. His entire world, his family, his identity as a father, it was all built on a house of cards now collapsing around him. He saw it all then, the hasty marriage, the premature birth, Serafina's relentless efforts to isolate him from Eleanor and Beatrice, the strange fleeting glances from Daniel Lee, the man who had approached him in the park, asking about Leo. It clicked. Eleanor watched her son, her heart aching, but she knew this painful truth was necessary. Serafina, Madeline preys on men like you, Julian. Stable, successful men. She creates a loving facade, makes them fall for her, isolates them from their support systems, and then when the time is right, or when things get complicated, she leaves. And she always takes a substantial settlement with you, Julian, are just the most successful one she's targeted, and the longest one she's managed to hold on to. Julian's gaze, now filled with a crushing despair, connected the final dots. His recent surprise cruise, his mother's invisible birthday, the deliberate, cruel exclusion of Eleanor, the subtle nudges towards early retirement in liquidating his investments. It wasn't a spontaneous act of love. It was a calculated maneuver, a prelude to her final act of abandonment and financial pillage. The betrayal was so complete, so insidious, it took his breath away. He looked at the woman he had loved, the mother of his children, and saw only a stranger, a predator, a cold, calculating monster. Julian stared at Serafina, his face a mask of profound disbelief and anguish. The documents lay scattered on the table, irrefutable evidence of a decade of deceit. His voice, when it came, was broken, barely a whisper. Serafina, Madeline, was any of it real? Any of our life? Any of your love for me? Serafina stood exposed, cornered, stripped of her carefully constructed facade. Her eyes, usually so bright and expressive, were now cold, devoid of emotion, darting rapidly as if seeking an escape. She said nothing. Her silence was deafening, a crushing answer in itself. From the living room, Leo's innocent voice pierced the heavy air. Grandma, can we have ice cream now? The simple, childlike request highlighted the devastating reality. Innocent children, caught in the crossfire of an adult's monstrous lies. Eleanor reached across the table and gently took Julian's trembling hand. Julian, she said, her voice filled with tenderness. Leo is still your son in every way that truly matters. You have loved him, nurtured him, raised him. That bond is real and unbreakable. But he also has a biological father who loves him, a man who has searched for him for years, a man who wants to be a part of his life without disrupting the love he has for you. She then turned her gaze to Serafina, her voice hardening with steel. Madeline Estelle, Eleanor stated, using the name that now felt like a brand, you will not attempt to flee with these children. You will not further manipulate this situation. We have all the documentation, all the evidence of your past deceptions. We will protect Leo, and we will protect Chloe. If you attempt to disappear again, we will pursue you through every legal channel available. You will face the full consequences of your actions. Serafina, seeing no advantage, no escape, no further game to play, simply turned and walked out. Without another word, without a backward glance, she left Eleanor's home, leaving behind the wreckage of 7 years of lies, a shattered husband, and 2 innocent children whose lives she had twisted for her own selfish gain. 6 months later, Eleanor's home was filled with a different kind of warmth. It wasn't the strained politeness of a forced family gathering, but the genuine, resonant hum of real connection. Leo and Chloe burst through the door, their faces beaming, each clutching a small bouquet of flowers and a box of Eleanor's favorite cookies. "Grandma!" Chloe shrieked, launching herself into Eleanor's arms. Leo followed, a wide grin on his face. Julian walked in behind them, looking healthier than Eleanor had seen him in years. The shadows under his eyes were gone, replaced by a quiet strength. His shoulders, once perpetually hunched with unseen burdens, were now relaxed. Daniel Lee was there too, having gently integrated himself into their lives. The children had adapted with remarkable resilience, guided by Julian and Eleanor's honesty and love. They now called Julian Daddy and Daniel Daddy Dave, a sweet and simple solution that honored both men's places in their hearts. The journey had been arduous. Eleanor recounted it to Daniel one evening as the children slept upstairs. There was a lot of therapy for Julian, for the children, and for me, to be honest. We had to have many careful conversations, explaining the truth in a way they could understand without shattering their world. The legal proceedings had been emotionally draining, but ultimately, Serafina, Madeline, had voluntarily relinquished custody, disappearing as predicted, leaving Julian with sole custody of Chloe and Daniel sharing legal guardianship of Leo with Julian. The initial confusion and heartbreak the children experienced had slowly given way to healing as the oppressive atmosphere of secrets and manipulation lifted. Their new reality, though unconventional, was built on transparency and love. Julian's divorce was final. He still carried scars, a quiet sadness for the years lost, the trust betrayed. "I feel like such a fool, Mom," he had confessed one afternoon. Eleanor had held him close. "No, darling, your capacity for trust, your ability to love so deeply, those are not flaws. They are your greatest strengths." Serafina was the flawed one, twisting those beautiful qualities for her own ends. One evening as they shared a meal, Daniel, ever thoughtful, had made a proposition. "Eleanor, Julian, I've been thinking. Leo and Chloe call me Daddy Dave now, and Julian is Daddy. We've built a real family here, and I want to honor that, honor everyone's place. I'd like to officially add Patterson to my name. Daniel Patterson Lee. That way I share a part of a name with Leo, and we truly are one family." Eleanor had been deeply moved. It was a gesture of profound respect and commitment, a recognition of the new strong bonds they had forged from the ashes of deception. She looked around her home, once a place of quiet solitude, then a stage for her humiliation, and now a vibrant hub of genuine family life. It was unconventional, perhaps, but it was honest, and it was filled with love. They had fought for each other, for the truth, and in doing so had proven that love, even when wounded, could overcome destruction and build something even stronger and more resilient. Her home, once empty, now hummed with the echoes of laughter, shared stories, and endless possibilities, a testament to their fight for each other.